Sometimes the big city gets to be too much. Too many cars, too much smog, too much congestion. That's when you need a weekend getaway. An escape from reality to an exotic and relaxing place close by where you can recharge your batteries.
Have you seen my jacket? It's all black from the smog.
I know, it's awful. I just want to get some fresh air. Let's just get out of here.
Yeah, where do you want to go?
How about Santa Barbara?
All right.
Okay.
Let's ride.
When you live in Los Angeles, Santa Barbara is the place to go. It's often called the Riviera of the US. A long, nice beach, quaint little shops and restaurants, wine tasting, and much more. The roads here are perfect for motorcycle riding, sweeping curves and little hills full of old oak trees. The Santa Barbara region is unique in that the mountains stretch from east to west, which opens the valleys toward the ocean. It makes the evenings relatively cool, even with Southern California measures, and the salty air gives a special character to the wine that is grown here. The number of vineyards have practically exploded the last 10 to 12 years, from about 5 to 50. In Los Olivos, there are wine tasting bars side by side throughout the village. We cruise down the picturesque main street and take in the relaxed atmosphere, where people stroll from one wine bar to another. All in a Dionysian cloud, where you can hear someone humming, "Don't worry, be happy." If the shortest route between 2 points is a straight line, then the most fun route is curves and hills, and we got plenty of that here. Riding around among all those vineyards pique our curiosity to the point where we finally have to stop at Curtis Winery to quench our thirst for wine. I mean, winemaking knowledge. We're here with Chuck Carlson from Curtis Winery. And Chuck, tell me, what does go on here?
Well, thanks for coming by. I'm glad you guys picked our path. The wine industry here in our Santa Barbara County area has been going on since the mid-'60s. And Curtis Winery has roots back into the early 70s. Grapes, as you well know, don't grow everywhere in the world, but they grow in a wide variety of places, and we have certain varieties that do better here than in other areas, and we focus on those varieties. And these are all the grape varieties that originated in the Rhone Valley of France. Syrah, Viognier, Mourvedre, Grenache, Roussanne are the primary ones, and I make some blends. It's a great experience to come out here and visit the wineries during the harvest time. You get to see all the activity, the harvest workers picking the grapes, the processing of the grapes, the destemming and pressing that goes on, and then you can actually really smell in the air the fermentation that happens, and you just get this very ethereal aroma here inside the winery, and it smells like everybody envisions a winery smelling. So it's a great opportunity, and I would like to invite you all out to experience it. For our program here, the wines typically spend about 12 to 14 months aging in barrel. Very few wines last 100 years. They're best consumed mostly, 5 to 10 years after the vintage date.
Do you see a specific taste here in California versus other regions?
Very much so. I think California, for the most part, has kind of been one of the leaders in this kind of new world style of winemaking. Very fruit forward, ripe flavors, soft tannins, wines that don't need a lot of time to age or spend time in somebody's cellar for 10 or 15 years before they taste good. We open up right into the Pacific Ocean, so typically in the afternoons this time of year we get this cool marine breeze that blows in. At night it gets foggy, so it's that temperature fluctuation that really make this a special growing area. very nice soils for growing grapes. They're not too fertile, and they make the vine struggle a little bit, so you get more concentration of flavor.
What's the vibe like with your neighbors and competitors? Are you all like one big family, or you're like rivaling sports teams, or what's going on here?
Well, we're the best. No. The weather conditions we had over the winter, we did not have a lot of rain. The vines are somewhat stressed. We don't have a lot of vegetative growth here. When you have smaller number of clusters on every vine, you get a little more concentration of flavor. And of course, with the smaller berry, you have more flavor as well. Those clusters that are like this, we'll go ahead and pull those off and put them on the ground to ensure that these get nice and ripe and we don't have any green berries going into our tanks of wine. And it's just kind of a quality issue that we like to do. It's called green dropping. The most exciting time, I think, is during the fall when we're actually harvesting grapes and they can see everything that goes on here.
You said September to November?
Yep, September to November.
And we're on the famous Fox and Canyon Road, so come on by. Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow, that was really interesting. I feel so cultural. I want to go to a museum.
What? You want to see some old dusty mummy?
No. Motorcycles, of course.
Ah, where do you do that?
In Solvang, they have one of the nation's best collections there.
Really? Let's go.
All right.
Let's ride.
Hi, so today we're here at the MC Museum in Solvang with Virgil Elings. Hi, Virgil.
Hi.
So this is a great collection you have here, and we're going to walk around and look at the whole thing. Just tell me briefly how this museum came to life.
Well, I had bikes, and I've collected for, let's say, 20 years, and they were in garages and bedrooms and God only knows where. And well, I like things that I tend not to know about, and so I'm usually not looking for a bike. People now know I collect, and so they get a hold of me. So people will try and sell me things all the way from pieces of junk in their backyard, which they think I actually restore motorcycles, which I don't, to fairly rare bikes. Feeling on the rare bikes is if we'll never see a bike like that again, we probably ought to buy it. If you do see it again, it'll be at a much higher price. Yeah, exactly. So what the heck. And so this is really sort of my warehouse, so to speak, except it's a nice setting, and we've opened it up to the public so they can come in and look at the bikes. There's a little bit of an emphasis on race bikes in the museum because we did do racing, and a lot of the rare bikes actually are racers, things that have survived over the years. Like most collectors, once the room is full, you keep buying. So
and you add on.
There's there's overflow again. Right. So it's like the old days. They're everywhere.
Great. We're gonna walk around the room and look at some specific bikes.
All right.
Tell me about this bike, Nimbus. What is a Nimbus?
Nimbus is Danish. As you know, Solvang is the Danish capital of America. Some guy came in one day, Danish of course, and says, how come you don't have a Nimbus? You're here in Solvang. And I said, what's a Nimbus? And he said, well, it's this great. I said, go find me a Nimbus and I'll buy it. So he found this in Copenhagen. Yeah. And the crate was huge, as you can imagine. Yeah. But anyway, this is my Nimbus. Nice bike, 1936. Technically fairly interesting. Overhead cam, 4 cylinders, foot shift. And the hang-up is they looked exactly the same in 1957. 20 years went by, and they did absolutely nothing. Well, that's the Danish for you. Some people knew there was a carriage in the barn, and they wanted to use it in a parade. So they were back there taking sheets off stuff, and here was the 1914 Indian which hadn't been touched in all that time. And someone was smart enough to not restore it and just leave it the way it was. And so here it is, original tires, the whole thing. It's something that you would be afraid to start, though. You know, I mean, people say, oh, do you ride it around? And you say, oh, wait a minute. If something goes wrong with this one, we got trouble. So anyway, a fun bike. This is called a Matchless Silverhawk, 1933. Actually quite fancy. This engine, although it's a little hard to tell, is a V4 overhead cam. It's got swinging arm suspension, which people think is new, and so all the new stuff. And it was able to just come out in time for the Depression, and that was the end of the Silverhawk. And so some things, the timing's bad or the engineering's bad. Most things people think are new ideas have been tried before. It's just that they usually were not done well enough to work. And so, yes, somebody tried that before, but it didn't work. And so anyway, this I call high tech from the English, and at the time it was. One of the few bikes that I restored from boxes of parts is this Triumph, and it took 2 years. And after doing that and finding the parts and putting it all together, you convince yourself you can't do a lot of that. So I tend to buy bikes now which are already done. Here's a bike, a 1904 NSU, which was restored by a guy who likes to restore stuff, and as soon as he's done, he sells it. And I'm just the opposite. I would like to buy it when he's done. Here's an old bike which is over-restored. People tend to do that. And look at all this nice chrome. This is 1912. They didn't use chrome in 1912. But people tend to like over-restored things, and whereas I would sometimes rather have this thing original. It would look like crap, but it would be the right stuff. Vincent in the early mid-50s was certainly the fastest bike on the road. Nothing would approach it. And but the company was always in bankruptcy. Its downfall was the cheap car. Back in the 50s, you didn't buy a motorcycle as an extra vehicle to go right around on. You bought it as transportation. And people did that, but once the cheap car came in, they really got nailed. This is a Black Lightning. There were 30 of these in the world, and this one happens to have owned the American speed record 3 times in its life. Quite a rare bike, but buggered in the sense that they put the supercharger on it and blah, blah, blah and all that, but it has history, and so there's always a story about a bike. This is Joe Blow's raced this bike. No, Joe Blow raced the front wheel of this bike. And it's always funny about race bikes. They say, oh, is that the one that was raced at blah, blah, and I think if you go back in racing history, these guys would put frames and engines together, whatever ran for a weekend. You got to run what runs.
Right, yeah.
And what bike?
Yeah, right. Some parts.
What part of it? This is a BSA Super Rocket. Clearly, they ran out of names to call things. When you're up to Super Rocket, you're about there. This is after Vincent had died, and so these were then sort of the fast bikes in the world. Strangely enough, I had one of these when I was in high school. 2 models. One was a Golden Flash, which I rode from Iowa to California and back in 1957 with no camera, no freeways, no nothing. I don't even know if I had tools. It's something I wouldn't even think about doing today. I wouldn't take this to Iowa and back under any circumstances. But anyway, this. When we were kids, and I don't know how we survived. These bikes are very fast. They'll go out and go 120 miles an hour. You know, we were 16, and what the hell did we know? And we would do crazy things on these things. So I'm surprised we survived. But this bike, there was an article in Classic Bike, which is an English magazine. They would give away a bike every year in a contest, and they gave away this bike. And some guy in Minnesota won the damn thing, which I'm sure the English really appreciated. And so they did an article on this guy, and he said, oh, I really love it, I'm going to ride it, and you know, it's just what I wanted, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, just on a chance, I'll call him. and see if he wants to sell it. And he said, yeah, of course I want to sell. I want the money. I said, okay. So the bike is mine. And that was quite a few years ago, and I've had it around for quite a while. I don't know how, I can barely kick this thing over to start. As kids, I don't know how we used to do this. Italians are always quite good at bikes, and this MV Augusta, this man made helicopters. Mm-hmm. He was quite well-to-do, and so therefore he could make motorbikes just as a hobby, and other people were trying to make it as a business. Right. So it was sort of cheating. The real race bikes, which were never sold to the public, like this one, were spirited out of the plant somehow. This one came from a guy who was not only a mechanic at MV, but the chauffeur of Count Augusta. Mm-hmm. And you might believe he got it almost legally from the Count. The Count had a reputation of burying bikes underneath the runway of the airport because he didn't want technology to get out to other people. Honda, again, worked their way up from things people used to laugh at, and then they just kept making them. They were practicing. You got to watch out for people who are practicing if they're doing well. Yeah. And so they worked their way up, and 1970, it came out in '69 first, was this 4-cylinder Honda for the street, and it just blew everything away. It was basically the end of the English domination of anything. The local dealer in Santa Barbara, he said when this came out, he just said that I'm not going to sell Triumphs anymore. This is probably the bike that's the star of the museum. John Britton in New Zealand really became obsessed with making race bikes that would, for instance, whip the Ducati factory. And I remember this video where in this race at Daytona, the Briton following the Ducati would come up behind him on the banking and do a wheelie. And the poor Ducati guys go, oh my God. He was the first guy to make carbon fiber wheels. And the story was when he went down to put a tire on it, the tire guy said, I'm not putting a tire on that piece of crap. That thing won't work. Yeah. Well, he proved to the guy it did work. And his idea was the following. If the bike is powerful, light, and narrow, you don't need fairing like some of these other race bikes. Well, Harley decided to do superbike racing at one time. Thought, gee, we're Harley, we can really do that. Special engine, there aren't very many of these, and they didn't do it. They couldn't beat Ducati.
So when you're in Solvang on the weekend, be sure to stop by the Motorcycle Museum here. Thanks, Virgil.
Yes.
Enjoy the tour.
Thanks for coming by. And it is one of the better museums in the country, so if people are here, they should, and are interested in bikes, they should really see it. They won't see some of this stuff anywhere else. Okay, let's ride.
Wow, that museum was fantastic.
I know, it's great, but you know, I'm getting hungry now.
So am I. But I don't want fast food. I want food with history.
History? What do you mean, moldy old bread?
No, you know what I mean.
I know this place, Cold Spring Tavern, is 120 years old. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Let's ride.
Okay, here we are with John in the mountains above Santa Barbara. So John, tell us, where are we and what do you do here?
Well, we're right off of San Marcos Pass, which cuts through the mountains between Santa Barbara and San Ynez Valley. And this used to be a stagecoach stop, founded in 1886. And the stagecoaches would travel up San Marcos Pass and stop here, change horses, because it was a grueling ride up. So they had to get a fresh team of horses here. Actually, it was the only stagecoach route that used a team of 6 horses. All the other Wells Fargo stages used only 4. That's how grueling that trip was. Now it's operating as a restaurant, and actually it's never been closed down since 1886. We specialize in wild game. That's what we're known for, because that's what was served here back in the early part of the century. So we always have things like elk, antelope, buffalo, wild boar, things like that, venison. The weekends, we are known as a favorite place for motorcycle enthusiasts, especially on Sunday. We could easily have 150 bikes here at any one time. We also barbecue tri-tip sandwiches. We serve about 400 sandwiches on a Sunday outside, as well as the dining room being usually full, and then also the live music up at the Log Cabin Bar. People will be sitting outside, eating their sandwiches, having a beer or a soft drink, and it's quite a scene on Sunday. Audrey, the owner that passed away, she was very insistent on us keeping the original look of the tavern. We don't change anything. We have very old furniture in there that we repair it if it gets broken. We don't put anything new in there. It was built in 1886 and it looked like this then. It still looks like this.
You could say it's a living piece of history.
But it definitely is, absolutely. It's almost like my job is, besides being a business manager, it's almost like being a curator of a museum, because we do have a lot of things around here that are very, very old and possibly quite valuable that we have to preserve.
Would you say the bikers are respecting this historic property?
Absolutely. This is their place. I mean, they really respect this property. They love it. That's why we're able to maintain it without having to do a whole lot of repair and things like that.
Thanks, John.
Okay, Eric.
We're looking forward to seeing you here on Sunday and having a great tri-tip sandwich.
Great.
Yeah, that was really good food. So what did you have, the elk or the wild boar?
I had the buffalo.
So what do you want to do tomorrow?
I don't know. I want to figure out who all these riders are. I want to find out where they get all their stuff.
Okay, but I know several stores we can go and visit actually.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go.
All right.
Let's ride.